move to regular business then. First item is the consideration of the Commissioner's recommendation on Level 5 status for the Southbridge Public Schools. Mr. Commissioner, I'll turn it over to you and staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and you know Russell Johnson, you know Rob Curtin, who have been very much engaged in this. You have two very consequential recommendations that I brought to you today, this and the Dorchester Collegiate. I do believe very strongly that where we have institutions that are not getting the job done for our young people, that we need to be decisive about that. And in the case of the Southbridge School District, I feel very strongly that we have a school district that, despite a dozen years of being an underperforming school district.
All right. We'll move to regular business then. First item is the consideration of the Commissioner's recommendation on Level 5 status for the Southbridge Public Schools. Mr. Commissioner, I'll turn it over to you and staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and you know Russell Johnson, you know Rob Curtin, who have been very much engaged in this. You have two very consequential recommendations that I brought to you today, this and the Dorchester Collegiate. I do believe very strongly that where we have institutions that are not getting the job done for our young people, that we need to be decisive about that. And in the case of the Southbridge School District, I feel very strongly that we have a school district that, despite a dozen years of being an underperforming school district, continues to underperform. And I have little to no confidence that, left alone, we'll wake up a year from now or 2 years from now and see things in a better place. I won't recount all of the concerns that were raised, that I've raised, and that are raised in the report. The performance is chronically low. Not only low achievement, but year-to-year learning gains by students are quite low, which means that students are not only often behind, but they're falling further behind each year. Leadership turnover, governance, and turnover is just outrageous, I would say. In Southbridge, we've seen seven superintendents in the last 4 or 5 years. We've seen 7 high school principals in the last 4 or 5 years. So I am recommending that you vote the receivership of the Southbridge School District. That would take effect immediately. You have a resolution to that effect in front of you. If you do take this vote, the next steps would be that I would move expeditiously to appoint a receiver. We would convene a local stakeholder group. These are processes that are laid out in the statute and that we've executed in Lawrence and in Holyoke. We would, once the receiver's on board, we would develop a turnaround plan with the guidance and input of the local stakeholder group. Bottom line for me is that at the end of the day, the young people in Southbridge deserve a stronger education than they're getting, and not only should we be providing that, but we can do a lot better than we're doing now. So I see this as an opportunity for the community.
I'm sure the members may have a few questions for you, but I think it's almost inarguable that if our goal is to make sure that all the students there, or even most, are prepared for the future, this district is falling far short. We have a very deliberate and statutory process to get here. One change in the timetable has been your suggestion that we might vote now, today, and I want to be clear, you're asking us to do that because of the state of the district. I think we need to be careful that we're ready to take it over. as we discussed, I think in the prior two level 5 designations, certainly a year ago in Holyoke, that once we take it over, we cannot fail. It's easy to criticize, but if we say the state's going to fix this and hand it back, we have to be ready. Could you update us on the process of finding a receiver, and are you prepared to accelerate that timeline so that we wouldn't create a more destructive limbo situation for a while?
Yeah, absolutely. And you are correct. I think that at this point, there's no ambiguity about the need for the receivership. I certainly don't feel any ambiguity, and so I see no reason to delay. We have already started the process of looking for qualified receivers. We've issued an RFP. We have gotten a number of very interesting inquiries. We expect that we'll have a number of proposals that will be viable proposals for receivership. Receivership under the statute can either be an individual or a nonprofit organization, and we may in fact be entertaining a nonprofit organization among the other applicants in this round. So I expect that by early to mid-February, we'll have identified that receiver. So we're well poised here. Russell and his team have done a tremendous job. The interim superintendent, Tim Connors, is here in the audience, and I know that he's committed to continuing with the district as needed and would provide continuity on the ground if we need that. And I've had that conversation with him as recently as yesterday afternoon. So I would expect by our February meeting I'd be able to announce the receiver. The receiver may not be in place at that point. It may take a little bit longer to get the receiver in place, but I think there won't be a whole lot of daylight. In the interim, as we did in both Lawrence and Holyoke, I would play the role of interim receiver for the Southbridge School District. If you take this vote, it will be immediate. It will be as of the vote that the state is in receivership of the district. The school committee is no longer has the authorities and responsibilities of the school committee. I would then assume that in the short run and eventually bringing in an external receiver.
Comments or questions, Mary Ann?
Thank you. Commissioner and Russell and Rob, if you can, I just want to understand, before the recommendation to declare underperforming, an accelerated improvement plan was created and then it was approved. Can you just get me from the AIP to the recommendation in terms of, the catalyst for that recommendation, or, what's the bridge, what's the work that happened between those two things?
Yeah, Russell, I'm going to turn to you in a second. I mean, I've sort of shortcutted my explanation to you here. I did visit the school district. I did observe classes. I did meet with teachers. It's astonishing how little guidance teachers are receiving at this point in time. They recounted to me that almost on a yearly basis for the last several years, they go through a curriculum development, curriculum documentation process with no clear guidance as to where the district's headed. Just in the current school year, and correct me if I get this wrong, the district could be on the verge of its 4th senior administrator, right? They started the year with one, they hired one into the fall. That person either never showed up or was only there for a short amount of time. Tim Connors has done a great job as an interim. He's not interested in being the long-term superintendent, very experienced. The district was lucky to find him. They're now doing another search. They ended up with 4 finalists. Two are no longer in the running. So it's just a parade of discontinuity that the school district continues to experience. Russell, do you want to provide any?
Absolutely. So the accelerated improvement plan focuses primarily on the instructional improvements that the district needs to undertake, and with support from us, we empower the district to write a plan that focuses on the types of curriculum, instructional, pedagogical changes that they'll make. We support it and we help to monitor the process. but it's not nearly as deep as what receivership would mean. So the report that our district review team conducted indicated that there were concerns above and beyond instruction, above and beyond curriculum, and the solution of receivership then is a solution that I think is more calibrated to the nature of the problems that go across the 6 domains that were reported on in the district review report.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Anyone else? No, so, Donald?
Are we just
Sure.
doing questions or discussion?
Questions, comment, discussion, this is, I think we're going to call the question today, so yes, any statement, topic?
Because I don't have a question, but I just want to discuss my intention.
Yeah, and then
as
we'll
we
go around and
normally
do
have.
that as well. Yeah, but first, are there any questions or background or any open items? No, then I think we should go to people's views at this point, because likely we will call the question today. So please.
So one thing that the commissioner just mentioned that I want to make sure that I underline a little bit and do ask is that I don't want to see a search that's expedited but loses a quality receiver from that. One thing that in the past for Lawrence and Holyoke is we've found an individual, a figurehead, rather than an organization or company to take receivership. I feel that model works. I mean, that is my own opinion. That we should make sure that if we appoint a receiver, it's an individual rather than an organization. So I just wanted to comment on that. Yesterday, when I found out that the vote may be called today, I initially thought I would abstain. And sleeping on it, putting more thought into it. And it was actually this morning that I decided I was going to vote. I'm going to digress a little bit in that recently I got into this whole Twitter thing. And one thing on Twitter here in the right, you see trending topics. And when I woke up, I saw a trending topic was Republic Day. And so I was curious. I found out that today in India, it's actually a national holiday. And today is a day that they're celebrating their form of government where they elect officials to carry out their views. And so we have that same form of government here, a democratic republic where the students elected me to carry out the best interests of the students. They trust me to make the best decisions for them. They have faith in my role here. And so it is with that that I am going to be voting either yay or nay on the recommendation. And with what we heard yesterday at the hearing, it seems that antithetical to Holyoke, the people here in Southbridge want this receiver to come in and help fix a lot of their problems, especially in an area of leadership. So it's with that that I am planning on endorsing the Commissioner's recommendation for the receivership of Southbridge. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Member Williard. Member Stewart, we'll just go around unless someone wants to jump in, but easiest this way.
Thank you. So, you know, it was a real privilege, as you said in the opening remarks, to be present to hear the community come out in such force as they did. I believe there are many hardworking folks in the Southbridge Public Schools and that they are all working in good faith, but in the absence of stable leadership, it's very difficult for educators and staff to feel supported, to feel there's a direction and a vision. When the system, and that's when the system starts to break down. It's a very, school systems are ecosystems too. The environment, once it starts to break down, it's a big challenge. So, I think that we've talked about the revolving door. People said a lot of things. The revolving door in administration, change can be good. Another lost year. They talked about, some of these things. Some folks really feel that it is a local decision and that we should give it more time. But I feel like the vast, vast majority of people were very supportive to have the state come in, to help them in a particular way. I think they're very concerned about holding on to the soul of their community. And so I would be hopeful for a quick turnaround, but only time will tell. So I kept hearing over and over again, we need your help. we need your help, we want your help, so I think, in this instance, I will be supporting the recommendation as well.
Thank you. Member Moriarty.
Thank you. So I also appreciated the opportunity for the public hearing last night and to hear from such a broad cross-section of the community of Southbridge. This is a community I identify with very closely. It's a mill town. It was once one of the largest optical producers. Where I come from, a mill town is once one of the great paper producers. And we find my hometown and theirs ourselves in very similar straits, but with a completely different outlook on where to go with this. Unfortunately, I heard a lot of acrimony and division. That's the sign of a dysfunctional political class. But I heard a pretty solid degree of solidarity among the teachers and the students, and particularly the parents who are most worried for their students. They're asking for this help. I have every intention of giving my vote to provide it. I do want to make this one-side comment. Internally, I don't know how similar Southbridge really is to Holyoke, but when nonprofits came into our level 5 schools in Holyoke, we chewed them up and spit them out. It did not work well. I agree with Donald. I think the person of a receiver, as we have seen in Lawrence and Holyoke, is meaningful, and I would encourage that you look more strongly in that direction than with an organization. Thank you.
Member McKenna.
Yes, so I definitely appreciate the opportunity to sit and listen to the community last night. It actually was quite a painful experience to sit and listen, but in some ways an optimistic one. There were so many people concerned about the issue, which was the basic issue, which was the life and learning of the children of the community, which we heard over and over again from parents and community members. And that is really what we're talking about. And I actually think the community of Southbridge is quite different than anything we've heard about before. In many, many ways, because there seem to be a variety of issues that we have not heard about before. Some of the same issues, but even more issues than we have ever heard about before. And I am in favor of the Commissioner's recommendation. And I do think there are, like any community, there are people, there are teachers, and there are parents and administrators who are well-intentioned, and no question a community who is reaching out for help. And I think that is the right thing for us to do. And I actually am usually one who's sort of reluctant to do this in many ways, but in this instance, not at all reluctant. And I think the community wants this, deserves this, and we have no option except to follow the Commissioner's recommendation in this case.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
So I'll keep my comments brief. I believe that we heard last night from more than 40 individuals, and I would wager to guess that 60% of them used the word help in their comments, expressing the desire to be helped in some way or another for the benefit of the children in Southbridge. And even those individuals who were opposed to receivership did indicate that if receivership was the decision, that they would wholeheartedly support it. I don't think you're going to have a problem establishing a local stakeholder group. I think there are lots of folks in Southbridge who are going to be truly committed to the upliftment of the students there. And so for that reason, I intend to support the Commissioner's recommendation.
Thank you. Member Noyce.
I too support the Commissioner's recommendation. I too was really struck by the degree to which the community asked for help. I think that we'll have less of a hill to climb in getting the goodwill of the community behind a plan. I hope that we will be able to go forward with the local stakeholder group in a way that does make people who feel that their voices have not been well heard. And I hope that this will be a short receivership.
Member Doherty?
First of all, I want to apologize for not being in Southbridge last night. I had a family commitment that I had to keep. I'm in a somewhat of a difficult position, being the person who holds the labor seat on this board. And I am opposed, very much opposed, to that segment of the law that allows the commissioner or receiver in a receivership situation to take collective bargaining rights away from employees in the district. I do not believe that collective bargaining is an impediment to student learning. And we live in a state, we work in a state that is #1 in the nation. All of our teachers in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, virtually all of them, in traditional public schools, work under a collective bargaining agreement. So I don't think collective bargaining is a problem, and I don't think this law should allow the commissioner or receiver to suspend collective bargaining rights. However, having said that, I recognize the serious problems that exist in Southbridge and the dysfunction, and I also recognize that even the teachers in Southbridge, given the tremendous circumstances that they face, tremendous obstacles, are willing to risk their collective bargaining rights, and they will not oppose a receivership. And for that reason, I intend to abstain on this vote.
Member
So,
Craven?
I have had a lot of experience with the Southbridge District over 10 years ago, where I think a lot of my fellow members of this board last night heard the same sort of passion and commitment that I heard, and the board of the Massachusetts School Building Authority heard from Southbridge, which, you know, in the Wayback Machine back in 2005 and 6, we were sort of in a similar situation where, you know, the district had declining statistics on measurements that DOE was measuring them by. They had a very dynamic new superintendent who was going to lead the district into sort of what we're looking at right now. A new school was thought of as part of the panacea, in addition to what we have in our board packets as $1.9 million of state assistance over the past 12 years or so for the district. And again, we see that the best intentions of people, and what struck me the most was that people who vigorously oppose each other, you know, they've gone through 2 major school committee shifts in the past couple of years, right? Both agreed, both sides pretty much agreed that they were not, that the assistance of the state in the form of receivership would not be completely detrimental to their progress. And so that is actually something completely new, and I think it shows that there's a lot of people who come at this with very good intentions and realize that that they do need the assistance to sort of get past whatever roadblocks they have locally. I will also note that the district itself, with the size of it, is a unique, as Member McKenna brings up, is a very unique proposition for this board to look at in terms of receivership, because several of us reside in districts where the high school is almost as big as the entire district of Southbridge. And to see that they are actually spending, for the most part, above the net school spending for the statewide average, that this has never really been a resource issue, but it has been a resources issue, means that there's been sort of a disconnect between how special needs and ELL, for instance, get treated as opposed to other things. And it begs the question of, when the state receivership comes in, if there is an infusion and redirection of cash, if there's a gap at the end of this receivership, how is that supported under Chapter 70? So I go back to this, and I appreciate my colleagues' comments on a receiver as a person versus an entity. And my question for all of us going forward is, once we are successful in Lawrence, in Holyoke, and in Southbridge, which I am supporting the Commissioner's recommendation today, what is the roadmap to make sure that these tools are sticky, that they have the roadmap to success that's not just the dynamic person, because we see in Southbridge that they did have the dynamic superintendent, they did have someone who was a change agent, they have a brand new school out there for 1,100 students, that is a middle and high school project that a lot of districts in the state would love to have and replicate. So I feel that the receivership can bring us to the next level with Southbridge, and that these circumstances can be relatively soon turned around, given the goodwill of everyone we heard from yesterday. However, I would like to make sure that this might be the fastest in and out receivership that this department has. And I'd want to know that the roadmap and the policies that are left behind aren't sort of rejected in 4 or 5 years, as I personally have experienced with, in this case, Southbridge, where we saw that they were on the path to success, the new school comes in, and then things sort of fell apart after that fact. So I just want a word of caution on this, which is that I support the receivership, and I also support that my prediction is that this would be one of the faster ones, and that there'd be a roadmap for the board to have as a toolkit going forward, that we know how to keep it going, that the district is self-sufficient to keep it going after the receivership concludes. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the commissioner and his team for the work that they've done, the leadership they've shown in getting us to this point. I think as we discussed, or was discussed last night, and as we've discussed before here, Southbridge has been a district that's been struggling for many, many years, and in some ways this action and this engagement is long overdue. And it takes real leadership to make that happen. I want to thank all of you for bringing us to this point. I certainly want to reiterate the observations that my colleagues have made about the comments from the families, from the staff, from the leadership within Southbridge that we heard last night. I think there was a consistent message, even if people disagreed about whether the district should be placed into receivership or not, that partnership with the state was essential, that they were willing and open to engage with whatever resources and whatever people we could bring to bear in order to do what's best for the children and families of that community. So I think we enter this process in a very good position. I hope that will serve us well as we move forward. Just one a quick comment, perhaps somewhat contrary to some of the comments that have been made about at least being open to the idea of having a nonprofit organization or some other entity be engaged in or lead a receivership. I have no idea what that would look like or who that would be or whether that's the right choice, but I don't think we should be ruling out any possibility here for making sure that we are bringing sort of the best talent and the greatest resources to bear on this particular district. And in some ways, the size of the district may present a unique opportunity and a unique challenge when it comes to this particular question, because the reality is that the issue of sustainability and of human capital is perhaps the greatest challenge the district may face. And bringing in, or at least thinking about an organization or an institution rather than just an individual may be one way in which to address those two critical challenges. So all I'm saying is I think we should keep our options open, and obviously the commissioner needs to exercise his judgment, and I think he ought to be able to choose from among the alternatives that are out there. I guess the other thing I will say just in closing is I think the response that we heard last night from the community is in part a reflection of our early success in Lawrence and Holyoke. And I don't want to minimize that because to a great extent our ability to engage successfully and to do so in a way that doesn't engender conflict that makes it hard to make progress on behalf of students and families is based on our track record and our cumulative success in the places where we are already engaged. Again, I think the path in Lawrence has been quite successful and well documented. The early indicators from Holyoke are similarly positive, and I think the feedback from those communities that make their way directly and indirectly to communities like Southbridge have been tremendously important in making it possible for us to engage in a productive way that will, I think, ultimately benefit all the children. So thank you.
Thank you. My fellow board members know that I'm not lacking in words when necessary, but I can't add a lot. I think it was beautifully spoken by everybody and very clear. I am also prepared to accept the commissioner's recommendation. I will say that one of the things I checked with him was if we moved this up, that it wouldn't rush the selection of a receiver, but that it would work, and I have his word that the process will get us to a good solution. I like the secretary. I'm open to hearing the commissioner's ultimate recommendation, whether it's an individual or a group, because each situation is different, and even if there are similarities among districts and towns, there are real differences, and we heard about some of them. And mostly, I just think we are compelled to act, particularly after what we heard last night. So there is a motion. I ask if someone would move it. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any comment or suggested changes? This would enable us to accept the commissioner's recommendation to designate the Southbridge district as level 5, and then all of the things that would follow under the statute. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. So the measure carries 9 in favor, none against, and 1 abstention. Thank you.